Thank you, Anoop, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy weekends, I know how it can be as a parent, to be here for the Food Freedom Conference. There are families here that have traveled in from all over the country. I know I met some out in the hallway from Philly, from upstate New York, and I know you guys are super excited to hear directly from the food allergy team and from Dr. Randhawa himself. We have a lot of fun things planned this afternoon. It's going to be very informative, so let's get things started with a short video. Take a look. Up here? I've got to press the button apparently. All right. I'm in charge. Oof, I hope it's the play button. No, it's not.
I was allergic to pretty much everything is what we liked to joke. I was having reactions to gluten, dairy, eggs, and pretty much all nuts and tree nuts.
I was allergic to walnuts, pecans, hazelnuts, and soy sauce.
Every type of tree nut, and deathly allergic to peanuts.
Before finding the Institute, life was very scary at times. Food is involved in everything we do.
It's all pervading. It really did affect everything in our family. We couldn't be spontaneous. We had to plan all of our food. We had to plan outings very carefully.
Birthday parties were always really hard because, of course, Parker, like any other kid, just wanted to be able to eat the birthday cake or, eat the snacks. So we would always have to let the parents know ahead of time and bring our own food. So when Parker was diagnosed, we were told, someday they were working on a peanut patch, a peanut pill, but we didn't know how long that would be. Just avoidance, strict avoidance was what we were told was our only option.
There was one doctor who first told me I had oral allergy syndrome, and he said I didn't have to worry about all my reactions to everything. He said it was just going to be mild and that it could never go into anaphylaxis, which we later found out was not true, so that was kind of scary to get advice that was not correct and could have been really dangerous. And other doctors told me just in general it would probably be better to avoid nuts and anything I was reacting to in general.
When we found out about the tolerance induction program, it gave us so much hope.
As a parent, it means peace of mind. It means freedom for her to be able to just grow up as a normal kid and do all the things she's dreamed of.
This program definitely makes you appreciative of all the food you can eat. Having gone from not being able to eat something to being able to eat it again, it gives you so many options. I guess that's what food freedom really is all about. It's having options. What can I eat versus what can't I eat? It's like having open windows rather than closed doors. It's life-changing.
It's the greatest gift we could ever give to our daughter.
I truly never thought I would see the day, and it's such a blessing and a miracle.
We dreamed of finding a program like this.
It's 100% worth it, and I'm so glad I did SoCal Food Allergy Institute.
Well, for those of you out here that don't know me, my name is Shubha Chudgar, and like a lot of the families you saw in that video and a lot of families here today, I am a food allergy parent. Like you, I know the constant fear of not knowing if your child will accidentally eat the wrong thing, whether they're at school or a friend's house, a birthday party, restaurant. I know the stress of constantly remembering to pack individualized food for your kid wherever they go. I know that feeling of helplessness when they accidentally eat something that they are allergic to, and all you can do is sit there and wait for them to have a reaction to see what it is. EpiPen in one hand, Benadryl in the other. But I also know the relief when your child graduates from the tolerance induction program. and finally has complete freedom to eat whatever they want. And today, that's why we're here, to hear more information about this life-changing program. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the man that has brought hope and freedom to thousands of families. Dr. Inderpal Randhawa is the founder, CEO, and Chief Medical Officer. There's a lot of information, guys. You got to hear this. CEO and Chief Medical Officer of the Translational Pulmonary and Immunology Research Center and the Southern California Food Allergy Institute. He is the Medical Director for Pediatric Pulmonary and Clinical Immunology and Allergy at Miller Children's Hospital. He's the Program Director for the Pediatric Pulmonology Fellowship for the University of California at Irvine. He is a leading clinical academic scientist with 5 board certifications in transplant immunology, allergy, pulmonology, pediatrics, and internal medicine. Since 2005, Dr. Randhawa has successfully treated more than 10,000 patients using his unique research-based program called the Tolerance Induction Program, achieving an unmatched 99% rate of success. With over 150 peer-reviewed abstracts, presentations, and research publications, Dr. Randhawa has dedicated his work to helping patients achieve what we like to call food freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, the man I simply refer to as Dr. R, Dr. Inderpal Randhawa.
Oh. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, please. Wow. Shubha, are you out of breath after all that titles? I'm sorry. I'll have to start removing some titles. That may help. Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. It's great to be with a community of individuals who advocate and understand this need. This is a need, a serious need. You have 8 million plus children with food anaphylaxis in this country, 25 to 30 million adults with food anaphylaxis in this country. That's a huge, huge population, 10% of the US population on track to hit a diagnosis of food anaphylaxis. So I think if there's a takeaway from this presentation or from our time together, I hope it's one thing, because whether you are in the program, your child's already finished this program, whether you're on our enrollment list, whether you just recently got diagnosed, if you are an advocate, if you are a collaborator with us, in the end, it doesn't matter, because I hope you walk away and understand that this is a special organization. It's a very special place. It operates in such a unique way. We have to understand those layers, and that's where hope lies. We've done this work across many different disease areas. A lot of people ask me, what's next? What is the next area of study? Well, we should first look back. I mean, origins are as important as destinations. So we've done the same type of work across numerous lung diseases. We've done the same type of work across hematologic diseases. Not to the same scale as food anaphylaxis, but the potential is clearly there. So again, I hope you understand the gravitas it takes to kind of get this done, the seriousness, and also understand that it's a special place that makes this happen. And if you saw our initial presentations earlier in the day, and you just walked around the conference here, you realize how many layers of function is in this organization that allows us to be where we are and where we go next. I got engaged in the space of food anaphylaxis, kind of by chance. My kids don't have food anaphylaxis. To be honest, I tell people this, so you could take it any way you like. When I was a younger physician, I had no interest in food anaphylaxis. It never hit my world. It was never something I dealt with. But as somebody who has to be in the intensive care unit and talk to families and talk to patients, and you see this ultimatum that is present, meaning a patient is now sick enough to be in a life-threatening state, and what that does to the family, to the patient, and their entire community, it was absolutely astounding. There's no other way to put it. It shifted the entire framework of what a childhood should be. It first shifted the framework of what a family has to go through growing up. All those common, normal things that we anticipate, meals together, holidays together, and so forth, all of that changes. But that's not what made me do my work. What made me do my work was the severity of these reactions. I did not understand that somebody could eat a speck of something and be in a position where they're on full life support measures in a matter of minutes. So that's where it began. And now, 16, 17 years later, a bit older, with a lot more titles, as Shubha knows, we're in a very good position. And again, very proud of the work that we're doing here. I do want to take a second and thank our teams who put this conference together. It's a lot of work. It's not easy, and we're at the tail end of the whole COVID thing, so getting this organized was no easy task. Appreciate you all coming out, but I want to thank our team who put this together. Give them a quick round of applause. Thank you. So at our core, the one question I'd say that I got asked the most is not the why now, it's more the how. Like, how did you pull this off? How did you, as a academic, scientist, physician, with not a whole ton of, quote, business experience, generate an operation that can treat 15 times the largest center of a comparative center in the world in just a decade of time? So think about that. 15,000 patients in a system when other systems around for 30 years can only barely get to 800 or 900 patients, and they don't even treat those patients. So it's important to understand that it starts with a mission. It is a mission. It is a focus. It's a mindset. It doesn't shift. You never get distracted. A pandemic didn't distract me. We have to go forward and get to that finish line, and that means every patient, no restrictions, we don't say no to anybody, and we get them to remission. It's just that simple. That had to then be built into an organization, and that filters across every employee, every workflow, every system, every software. It's quite amazing when you think about it from that perspective. I'm gonna play a quick video which talks about it in a slightly different way. In medical school, I asked, why are we ignoring a certain condition? Why are we not pursuing a different form of therapy? And the answer often was, well, that's not what's done. And so I knew very, very clearly at this stage that I had to do something differently. And now, with over 10,000 patients in treatment in just over a decade of time, it is reflective of this comprehensive approach, bringing in data, science, applied math towards research and development. Slightly intense, but that's okay. Data, science, and applied math applied to a single disease, one disease at a time, not just across the research and development aspect, but the therapeutic element, and taking it full circle every time. That model is entirely unique. If you kind of look at research science as a whole, and keep in mind, I come from a family of scientists. I have trained in all of the proper institutions, and I don't encourage looking at this as a criticism. The intent is good. The intent is appropriate. But the reality is systems that are traditionally built practice traditionally. That means they are doing pure hypothesis-driven, one-size-fits-all, clinical trial-based treatment options for any disease. And that's how it's built. That's what the NIH supports. That's what I was trained under. And that's the work I did. That's the type of grants I received early in my career. And what I asked very early, being in the transplant world, is said, we're not moving the needle fast enough. We're not getting it done quickly. We're still having too many patients, fundamentally, were sacrificed in this process, which I was not okay with. So what we've done here in this period of time is take a different approach. You can look at data, science, and applied math, and you can point towards personalization. You can look at data, science, and applied math, and you can point towards innovation. But we are simply somewhere else, and that's what allows us to continue to grow. That's what allows us to continue to move as a company that has not received external investor funds for its first decade plus of activity. That's what allows us to be nimble. That's what allows us to get through things like the pandemic. But at a baseline level, I always try to get to a kind of a high umbrella level explanation of what we do. Well, in the food anaphylaxis space, we offer an accurate diagnosis. That's very key. For any of you who, even if you're an adult with food allergies, you realize pretty quickly that you go get tests done and the accuracy's not there. You're told something and something else happens. Maybe you're told you're allergic to something, you can actually eat those things. Maybe you're told you're non-allergic and you end up having anaphylaxis to those foods. That's unacceptable. If we cannot get our diagnosis correct, we are not ever going to move forward in a therapeutic model. What else do we do? Very clearly, we offer a tolerance induction program or TIP form of treatment. That means we have to have an individualized program that actually monitors a patient from start to finish. It gets them to the end of that program safely with minimum risk. This space is without a doubt high risk. We're talking about patients where small amounts of protein can cause serious reactions. How is the system built to avoid that level of reactivity? That's how deep our system can operate and why we go to the process of manufacturing, why we go to pharmaceutical grade levels of manufacturing to make sure this process works well. You'll see more about that in a second. And when you're done, you want to know that you're in remission. You want to know that this child who is formerly anaphylactic to a whole series of foods can eat those foods without restriction. They can go to any event, any dinner, any cultural meal, and have no problems. They should eat like a non-allergic person. So how do you keep them in remission? That's the other question. If you've dealt with any other disease, take cancer for example, and they tell you you are in remission, talk to any of those patients. What they tell you is they are most afraid of their annual visit going back for a scan, thinking it's going to come back. And that's unacceptable to us. So our technology and systems continuously monitor these patients, track them, monitor them, so they never fall out of remission. That is fundamental because if you go through all this work, we're not going to lose the success of these cases. How do we do the accurate diagnosis? That is AI. That is machine learning that is tested and pushed towards our artificial intelligence methods. Our AI work is deep, it's heavy. We have full teams doing this work. This is now currently with the pre-submission phase of the FDA. Keep in mind, the FDA has never had an AI segment until last year. So it tells you that what we're doing is certainly at the cutting edge or certainly pushing the cutting edge. Our treatment, what assures accuracy of our treatment is manufactured production of proteins, or what everybody else calls gummies, for lack of a better term. And of course, what gets us into remission and keeps us in remission is our future state, where we'd like to get to a point here very soon where we can produce all these proteins in a single bar. You consume that bar once a week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, whatever it may be, and your system's not going to fall out of remission. If it could be that simple, that easy, that's how you can actually stay in remission from this case. So what we do is no doubt complex, but it can be understood in a reductionist view. But before I go further into that, I want to be clear about how serious the problem is. So if you own a company, if you run a school, if you are a school nurse, if you are involved in a university, you are going to deal with patients, your employees, your students, who have food anaphylaxis. How do they live? What is their life like? Do you ever ask? And the fact is, we have been in this space for a decade, and we continue to learn, but it is incredibly difficult. We're looking at a situation where we are literally tracking to a 10% number. That means 1 in 10 people in this country in the next decade or so will have food anaphylaxis. That's a very high number. And that's not acceptable as far as the burden that produces. 86% of children with food anaphylaxis have more than one. That means it's not just peanuts, it's not just milk. In fact, on average, they have between 3.5 to 4.5 primary foods. And what that means for those of you who don't have food allergies, it means that your entire typical diet wiped away. You have to now go read, study, protect, make sure none of that happens, and that has a financial cost that is significant to families. And these are the things that we are understanding more and more. 72% of patients have a severe reaction. That means they had a reaction that required deployment of an EpiPen. They ended up in the ER or worse. And this typically happens once every 3 years. Again, imagine living like that. And again, what they tell you is, well, it's okay, just carry the EpiPen, right? And I don't know how many of you have ever put yourself in a position where I said, I'm gonna give you a 22 gauge needle that is 1 inch long, and I would like you to inject yourself with that. It is not easy, especially in the heat of the moment, certainly not easy. And then you're asking a parent to do it to a child. It just gets more and more difficult. So this never seemed like something that could be successful moving forward, which is really kind of the motivation behind this organization. And lastly, the vast majority of patients, certainly their parents, recognize the seriousness of their disease. This is not, and I say this only because I do believe there is a general belief out there amongst some of the medical community who say, well, it's being exaggerated. It's really not that bad. Well, talk to the parents who actually have this condition, and they will tell you it is as bad or worse than you can possibly imagine. So this is not a condition that should be downplayed, and you're talking to somebody who is a transplant immunologist. I'm dealing with cases that are at the end of the line, and I have learned to respect this condition in a significant way over the last decade. And with that, we've had to get our mind and our focus around taking a condition that has not had any major movement in 100 years. This is a 100-year timeline of food allergy, food anaphylaxis. On the left, you can see when anaphylaxis was first kind of discovered. In fact, in 1913, they gave the Nobel Prize in Medicine to a set of doctors who discovered anaphylaxis. And fast forward a few years, or a few decades, I should say, first antihistamine drugs were made, first concept of corticosteroids in the 1950s. And indeed, in the 1960s, as soon as they discovered a way to try to test for allergies, meaning food anaphylaxis, they tried to treat the patients. That did not turn out well. In the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and every decade forward, attempts have been made to try to treat this disease with blind introduction of the food itself. You're anaphylactic to peanuts, just give them some peanuts and let's see what happens. And so when I first was involved in this space, the very first thing I said was, we would never take an organ and give it to somebody else if we did not do some serious, in-depth analysis of this person's immune system and this organ that's a donor. Now that's a bit high, but I said, well, if we're gonna do the same kind of concept, why don't we look at what this is for food and what this is for the immune system? Meaning, we're gonna study peanut not just as a whole protein, but every possible dimension of it. And then we're gonna study it against every major protein class that exists, and we'll continue to build on it. And the results, in just 15 years of time, look what's happened. So in 15 years of time, large scale database organization. We're talking huge, hundreds of trillions of data points, database points in the immunological spectrum and the protein spectrum of animal and plant proteins. We're talking about research that is organized around that to the point where just recently, one of the major international organizations that produces blood tests utilized our systems and our research capacity to produce the first test for sesame that just got FDA cleared. That's our work doing this type of output. In addition, further controlled tolerance induction. What that means is every data point that comes into our system continues to improve our system time and again. That level of, you can call it quality control, you can call it quality improvement. In our side, it's all data science. How can we maximize our efficiency, our output? This is very, very key. And of course, we've continued to improve our approach towards diagnosis and treatment, as I mentioned previously. And lastly, we want to inform that concept of remission. How can we make sure that remission stays and it sticks? How can we do it effectively? So a child who finishes this program or a young adult who finishes this program is off in their life, and this is one of the last things they think about, except when it pings you on your app, right? So this is the model that we've built. Again, this is in a decade of time compared to an entire century. So in order to make this work, in order to actually get a solution here, it takes a lot. And I won't belabor this point too much, but if you want to understand the infrastructure and you want to ask the question, can we do this for another condition? It will take this type of implementation and this type of effort. We currently operate over 20 active software systems. We currently operate 40 enterprise workflows. What that means is when a patient comes in and is drawn in our system, meaning we run our test, that data feeds the process. We know at that stage when the patient's going to start their form of treatment. We can predict relatively accurately a 75-day window in their future when they're going to finish the program. We know how much protein sequence they're going to need, and the accuracy of that model allows us to produce proteins, allows us to conduct our work, allows us to make sure this is an efficient process. I cannot stress how complex and difficult it is to build these types of workflows. In addition, this is what allows us to build AI. For those of you who are not terribly familiar with AI, it is not what I think is classically built in the film studios. This, AI is there really to make us very good at what we do. And we have done that now. We've actively built multiple systems so that this process is not operator dependent. It is enhancing the operator's ability to do their job best every single time. So this type of work and these types of builds makes it work extremely well. And of course, database development is key. So again, without belaboring this, this allows us to do is ask the next question. So for us, one of our next questions is, can we treat adults? Can we treat people who are in their mid-20s, late 20s, perhaps older? Well, in order to answer that question, you have to have access to data. That database needs to be highly organized, and these questions should move in a millisecond. That's what database development and procurement does. And keep in mind, this is done all under the tightest, highest level of HIPAA compliance, the tightest, highest level of federal regulation, and has done so since day one. And I elected to do that. That was not something that we had to do. And lastly, the applied math side. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of details of applied math. People don't find that terribly interesting all the time, or maybe any of the time. But certainly something that we deal with in our company on a regular basis. We find it immensely useful. It is really core to our function to ask questions and build answers to our questions and then test those methods in a safe and effective way. In fact, if you heard our manufacturing talk a little bit earlier today, a lot of applied math build goes into that as well. A lot of applied math goes into our diagnostics abilities. So this is a continuous process that we feed across the company. So if this was to ever solve another problem, this would have to be built again. And that takes an incredible amount of dollars. It takes an incredible amount of labor force. It also takes an incredible amount of mission. You have to be mission driven to want to do something like this. And for all of this great thing, this great program that exists, what does it look for the patients? Because in the end, that's what it comes down to. It sounds wonderful. It works incredibly well. It's highly efficient. We are constantly monitoring every case, start to finish. But for the patient, what does it look like? It has to be broken down into some easy to understand steps. So when a patient comes in, we are capturing data. Everything is the data. And again, data security is there. Pre-treatment is step one, and this means that we are taking patients and we're matching biosimilar class proteins. These are foods that patients are already eating, but one thing we understand is that the exposure rate of a food protein is key. How often you expose that patient, how regularly you expose that patient will drive their immunological numbers in the right direction, and we take advantage of that in a pre-treatment form. Phase two is conditioning. Conditioning, if you're in the medical space, these terms actually sound very similar to what we do in some other areas of large-scale immunotherapies. If we can actively produce the right conditioning model, which is all based on the actual proteins that are tested in these patients, this starts to drive the immune system down. So what this means is if you're anaphylactic to walnuts or if you're anaphylactic to peanuts, we are cross-exposing that immune system in a highly specific method, conditioning their immune system, getting it ready to draw down its immune response, so that once we're ready to actually induce tolerance, we are exposing that patient to large amounts of protein. What does this look like? If you're anaphylactic to peanuts, we're studying peanut across 17 sequences, 1-7. Every patient, usually, almost always, has at least half of those sequences available so we can expose their system in a pretreatment and conditioning method. So before we ever start tolerance induction with peanut, we've lowered their immune system response by 50, 60, or 70%, depending on the matching. So just think about that for a second. We are reducing their anaphylactic response without giving them the food first. Once their system is properly conditioned, it's just like education. You gotta get to a certain level of education before you move on to the next step. Now this conditioned system can induce or be in a state of tolerance induction. At the end of this stage, these patients are often eating about 24 to 32 peanuts. That's a huge amount of peanuts if you think about it, right? This is not like a small amount. And so at the end of this process, they finally hit remission, where these patients are eating literally 3/4 of a cup of peanuts, about 75 plus peanuts. This is done safely, effectively. All of the dose exposure is done at home, with the large-scale challenges are done in-house. This is completely unique to any form of food-based immunotherapy in the world, and this is what's been done for a very long period of time now. So that's a lot of information, but again, it's important to break this thing down into a sequence of steps and understand that all of our systems, our enterprise workflows, move this for every single patient, one at a time, every day. Just this month of August, we have, well, we're not done with August, I think technically yet, but this month of August, we have over 4,700 challenge visits occurring in our primary center here in Long Beach. That doesn't include our San Diego center. Now, to give you an example of what that means, if you go to a major university system, they may conduct between 5 to 10 food challenges a month. So, I mean, this is a factor of 1,000. Now, it's done safely. It's done under full cardiac telemetry monitoring. All highly trained personnel monitoring for any clinical symptoms, responding to those symptoms immediately. The great thing, well, we don't get a lot of reactions. It's very, very few. In fact, we have so few reactions, we publish them online. You can literally go to our website and see in real time how many reactions are occurring on a weekly basis. But our team will always be ready. We'll make sure that happens. And our team will make sure that every patient is safe. In addition, what this looks like for a patient is 24/7 on-call support. I challenge you to show me any other institution in any disease space that offers 24/7 on-call support, meaning a physician and an entire team saying, tell us what's going on, we will make adjustments there in real time, we will secure your case if there's a problem, we will escalate it to move you forward, and it's all tied to the whole system through our own data processes. That's been established since day one of this program. So these are the factors that allow us to do our work currently, and these are the factors that allow us to do our work moving towards the future. So a lot of information. It's sometimes better to visually understand. And so I brought the data of one of our patients, this young lady. Her name is Anaya, which I can state because they allowed me to say so. This is what our data system does. And essentially, we are drawing blood and running tests, systems, machine learning, AI systems. Human confirmation of those systems produces risk assessment. You can see that on the y-axis, which is going up and down vertically, is severity. On the x-axis is biosimilar proteins. And in this particular case, this young lady was highly anaphylactic to cow's milk. She was highly anaphylactic to walnut and pecan as well as egg. So she was in our program, I believe she started 8.5 years ago, something of that nature. So a case like this is where the benefit of technology really comes into play, because we can already predict her pretreatment conditioning and tolerance induction program, and it looks like this. So essentially, her case would require her to come in and start to introduce very specific proteins. Now, when I talk about these biosimilar proteins, why do we ask our patients to consume what some may consider odd food proteins? Well, I mean, this, if you can't read it up here, it says camel milk. And you have to understand that everything we use from a protein standpoint is properly FDA cleared, and these are things that people actually consume. It was necessary to sequence the amino acids of these proteins in different structures because it allowed us to isolate the 23 milk proteins and match them for a patient. So all of these sequences are not done in a way that's blind. These are highly specific for every single patient. So she came in and did her first few visits to different forms of milk. This includes forms of things like mare milk, camel milk, and so forth. And because she dropped her numbers so aggressively, we were able to cross-match and move quickly to modified forms of cow milk. This is all done with data. This is all done with numbers. You use that to predict and push. Now, we know that in order to get a patient cleared, we have to cross all 23 forms of proteins. She was able, by the fifth or sixth visit, take a very high set of numbers and move these things on to the sensitized zone of that initial snapshot. This was followed by other proteins in the egg family, and we used similar biosimilar models for those. And then we didn't put in here the rest of the walnut and pecan family because it was too much information for one slide. But I want folks to understand that it is the initial data and the analysis, the diagnosis, that allows us to do the rest of this work. So as she went through this program, she got to eventually clear both milk and both eggs, of course, the rest of the nuts. But this is pretty remarkable that we could do this, and during her entire clinical process had nearly zero symptoms. So that is the model that counts. And now she's been out a very long period of time, and I'll show you what her data looks like these many years out into remission as well. But before I go into that, I want to bring this group back to one essential concept, and that is, why would any parent go through what is, a few years of work here? Why would any patient go through the few years of work here to achieve this level of success, this level of food freedom? Well, number one, if you look at the data out there, and there's been a handful of surveys done, patients who have food anaphylaxis live this type of life. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to maintain work. It's very difficult to maintain school. It's very difficult to maintain, difficult to maintain a slide on the screen. And I think that we're there. But we're in a situation where the burden of this condition really has, I'd say, forced individuals or forced the population to push the system for solutions. For that, I thank the community. I mean, frankly, if people did not keep pushing this, we'd be in a regular situation where this would not have advancements. But for patients, it's a big problem because it causes a lot of decisions to be made that are not best practice. There's always a loose cable. Maybe that's it. But we handed out some envelopes to y'all. And if you don't mind, we're just gonna do a little quick demonstration. What are the quintessential elements to childhood? Halloween, birthday parties, field trips, classroom activities. And in a world where the vast majority of schools in the United States have zero awareness for food allergies, if they were handing out a Reese's peanut butter cup to a group of individuals, obviously we didn't put that in there, but I want the individuals who don't have a Reese's peanut butter cup, just stand up for a second if you don't mind. So this is the issue. You have single individuals who have to eat a different type of product. What was in the envelope was a Sun Butter cup. What does that do to these individuals? Not only that, what does it do to everyone who surrounds them? And I can tell you very simply, it's isolating. It's isolating for the families. They don't have sleepovers. They don't have situations set up where we can actually get these patients to have normal social development. If you are in university, if you're in college, what does this do to your development there in class? If you're trying to have a relationship, what does that do from a perspective of dating and meeting other people? This is what it does. And yet this is 1 in 13 people just in our room. Please have a seat. Thank you so much. This is our situation here, right? That this problem needs a solution, not only from a risk standpoint, but from the pure development standpoint of children as they grow up. And especially if we have a solution that can actually solve this problem, that's the key. So thank you for doing that. Let's see if we fixed our slide here, potentially. This patient I mentioned earlier, named Anaya, these are her numbers now. So you can see here from 2015 to 2022, this is the data points. I believe we even had some previous ones, but this is, it was relatively easy to collect in our current database. What is seen in the gray, blue, and orange are anaphylactic protein numbers for milk. And I want you to understand that she was done and was in the initial state of remission basically in 2018. And so what you're seeing here is continuous plummeting of those allergic values, hitting 0 just in the last few years. I think that's something you gotta hear. 0. We are trying to get our patients' actual data markers of anaphylaxis to get to 0. And if we can forecast that effectively, that's a game changer for this program and our patients. This is the work that we're doing. Now, if you look at her egg numbers, similarly, you can see that in the initial phase of exposure, the competition between animal proteins, and then of course the continuous drop that followed. The other numbers that you see that were going up, those are anti-allergic values. So the beautiful thing about the immune system is it can be relatively organized into pro-allergic and anti-allergic populations of markers and signals. And this is the work that's done for patients who are, kind of making their way through the program for years. We have patients who are 10 years out, we have patients who are 15 years out. Doing this kind of work long-term means that we have to track them long-term, which means that we have to know what our patients' data points look like long-term, all safely, all effectively, and it's a game changer. Patients like her are eating their main food proteins on a monthly basis. Now, if I told you you only have to eat milk and eggs once a month, you all know pretty well ice cream tastes pretty good, things are happening that they're probably just gonna eat a little bit more, which is absolutely not a problem, but we don't want this to be a burden on their schedule on a regular basis. So that's a case that's an older case. And then a few years ago, we had the pleasure at our last Food Freedom Conference of bringing up my friend Sammy, and his mom. And Sam has been in our program, he's been done now for years. But I think there's no better person to tell his story. I will start it, but there's no better person to tell his story than his mom. And it's just a good example of what it looks like for somebody who's been in this program recently, and I think hearing it from them works. But our data science side produces these models, and these models inform how we treat these patients. So unlike the last patient, Sam's case, which we can appreciate you sharing, letting us share his data, was primarily around some seeds and of course tree nuts. And again, those are very serious items. And what this allowed us to do is create a pre-treatment conditioning tolerance induction regimen to now leave him in a state of remission. And he's been in remission for several years now. So there we go. And so his journey through this process looked very different than the last patient. And so he started his program with pre-treatment and conditioning proteins. You are going to look at it and say, well, that's just a food. But that food actually has a very specific sequence of proteins. Those proteins are then sent to the patient these days in gelatin formation, and these start to drive down those numbers. By his 5th and 6th visits, he's already cleared, or he's starting to clear one primary class of anaphylactic proteins. And again, I think this is a very key point. The biggest gain of this program may be when you're done, but in my opinion, the biggest gain of this program is when you can stop reading labels. I mean, that to me is a big deal because it really, it's what creates it removes the limitations. And so we get to a point here in the middle of a case where he can actually stop reading labels. And you can see it listed here under the peanut cross-contamination because he has now reached enough protein exposure of all his primary protein sequences where reading labels is not an issue. So all of a sudden, you go to restaurants. All of a sudden, you can go to ice cream shops. All of a sudden, you can go to bakeries, and you just say, well, I'm not going to eat a peanut butter product at this stage, but certainly if it's got a few peanuts in it, it's not an issue. So that is one very important point in this program, but the ultimate is still the same. We want the patients to get to a point where they can actually go to a state of tolerance induction, and then of course finally into a state of remission. So again, eating 75 peanuts in a highly controlled setting, exercising every patient very aggressively after every single challenge throughout the program. Why do we do that? Because that is the ultimate stress test clinically for these patients. We don't want to have anything happen when you go home. We want to deal with it in our center. A, that's a rare phenomenon, but B, should it happen, we're going to manage it our way. So we invest an incredible amount of effort to protect our patients. I hope that becomes very clear. And then, of course, this is our young friend back then when he finished the program. So if that's okay, I'm going to invite Sam, come on up, and Leslie Ann. This one, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Leslie Ann Stone Malkoff, and I am here today to give you hope. My son Sam graduated from the Tolerance Induction Program 4 years ago, and he graduated by eating 75 peanuts. Sam was diagnosed with multiple severe life-threatening food allergies right after his first birthday. This is Sam on his first birthday, and shortly thereafter, I gave him a little bit of peanut butter, which led to a violent reaction and an immediate trip to the ER. We were referred to an allergist who diagnosed Sam with his food allergies that included peanut, tree nut, milk, egg, sesame seed, mustard seed. And unbeknownst to us at the time, before starting the program with Dr. Randawa, Sam was suffering from 13 different environmental allergies. We were told to avoid Sam's allergens at all costs. And even though we were strictly avoiding his allergens, little minor reactions would come up. Strange events, hives, rashes, really bad eczema, projectile vomiting. Sam always seemed to have a runny nose, a lingering cough, which we would just attribute to him being a kid in preschool. Anywhere we went outside the house, there was a cause for concern. Preschool, play dates, parks, birthday parties, restaurants, travel, hotels, airplanes, you name it. We had emergency plans, contingency plans, EpiPens, Benadryl. Everyone knew us wherever we went. I knew where all the hospitals were. It was really hard. A lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and nothing was spontaneous. So we would go back every year around Sam's birthday to see his allergist, and we would test and retest, and frankly, we would just hope for the best. And by the time Sam turned 3, we were told not to come back for 2 years because his allergies were so severe, it was unlikely he would outgrow some of them. As you can imagine, I did not handle that well. And I pressed our allergist for something we could do for Sam. I could not imagine continuing in this life of anxiety and somewhat isolation. I did not want this for my child, for my family. I would not stand for it. And he told us about this doctor in Long Beach, and we called to get information, and we put Sam on the wait list. And 9 months later, we were told that it's our turn. We were at the top of the wait list, and we were invited to a conference just like this, and I was sitting where you are today. And finally, there was treatment, there were answers. Things started to make sense, and we were on our way. This is Sam when he passed his first food challenge in the program. It was pine nut. Thumbs up. I will tell you, this program is incredible. It takes a commitment. The science behind the program requires compliance, and you will need to come up with systems to work the program with your child. In time, your child's allergies will go into remission. It is a marathon, it is not a sprint, and just like running a marathon, you will hit milestones along the way. And I would love to share with you some of our milestones on our TIP journey. The cat. So one of Sam's environmental allergies was cat dander. He was allergic to cats, and we would avoid going to a house if there was a cat in there. And about a year into the program, Sam was cleared for contact with cats, so we had a play date with a friend who had a cat. This is it. This is the play date. And Sam got to pet the cat, and he had no reactions, not even watery eye, nothing. We have not gotten a cat. This is Sam, again, about a year into the program where he could actually touch Peanut. And this is so significant for us because it meant that we no longer had to worry about getting on an airplane and having Sam brush up against peanut dust. Before the program, we would board the plane first, and we would wipe down the seats, and we had these seat covers that fit the airplane seat, and all hands on deck. And it was scary and nerve-wracking, but now this meant that if he were to brush up against a peanut product, it would not be a life-threatening situation. This was when Sam passed all his tree nut challenges. And this meant that he could eat food that was processed in a facility with tree nuts. And forever, he wanted to try the Oreo chocolate bar at CVS. So after we passed the challenge, we went straight to CVS, and he got to have the giant Oreo chocolate bar. This is Sam with his preschool teacher. Sam was always nervous if I wasn't around. Did they know about him and his allergies? Where was his EpiPen? Was there safe food for Sam? And his preschool teacher commented to me at the end of the year that she noticed so much confidence in Sam, especially on the playground, and she attributed this to his success in the program. This is when Sam got to go to a birthday party for the first time and eat what the other kids were eating. He gets to eat the cake now. And here they're doing make your own sundaes. I would always have safe treats in my freezer that I would make with safe ingredients, and I would pop a cupcake into my backpack before we would head out to a party. But now he gets to go to birthday parties and sit with the other kids and participate. And you'll notice he's wearing a medic bracelet. This is something I made him wear day in and day out. He slept with it. And then at the end of the program, he took it off. And we made a video of this. We put the medic bracelet on a stomp rocket, and we sent it off to space. And the video lives on the Food Allergy Institute Facebook page. I encourage you to find it. It was a great moment. My in-laws are from Hershey, Pennsylvania. I mean, what are the odds, right? And this was shortly after he graduated the program. We went home to our annual trip in Hershey, and he got to go to Chocolate World and pick out a treat. And of course, we went to the Reese's section, and he got to pick out a little toy car that was filled with Reese's Pieces, and he ate the whole thing, and now the car is our souvenir. Cool thing about this picture to me now is before we started the program, this would have been my worst nightmare. And now I look at it and I have pride. Look how happy he is. This is Sam on his first day of kindergarten. He's now in 4th grade. And we were able to put Sam in a public elementary school. He does not have a 504 plan. He eats whatever he wants. He sits wherever he wants. He eats food from the cafeteria. He has participated through the years in so many programs and activities just with the rest of the other kids. Halloween parades with all kinds of candy given out afterwards. Valentine's Day classroom parties with ice cream sundaes and homemade pies and potluck treats. End of the year, there's always a breakfast with pancakes. He's thriving, he's growing, and we don't worry. And the latest milestone, that's Sam's second to the left, he got so big. This summer, he got to go to day camp with his cousins. Those are my nephews, my other son, I'm all right. He got to go to a day camp in New Jersey, and this is like the type of camp where the bus picks you up in the morning and drops you off in the evening, and you have all your meals at camp. And there's a canteen where you can get treats, and you just pick out whatever you want. And he sits with the other kids. He's not labeled a food allergy kid. And again, he is growing, and he is thriving, and he is living. This picture in particular in this summer marks a milestone for me because he's gaining another level of independence. We are at the point where those preteen years are on the horizon for us, and we all know as parents, there's a lot of worry in those preteen years. But food allergy for us is not one of those worries. So I am here today, again, to give you hope. This program, it works. Sam is proof. Yeah. Through the years, I have met so many families from all over the country who have been on the wait list, who have been through the program and are now in remission, and it is awesome to see. If you are thinking about putting your child on the wait list, do it. There is no reason to not go on the wait list. If you're on the wait list and it's your turn to start, congratulations. If you are in the program, I know there can be challenging days to come up with those systems, to get your child to eat a certain quantity of food at a certain time of the day. Stick with it. The light is so bright at the end of the tunnel. If anyone has any questions for me, come find me after this. I'd be happy to share with you more about Sam and our journey. But I want to take a moment to thank the good people at the Food Allergy Institute and Dr. Randawa. You have forever changed our lives. Thank you.
You want that? Previously, I would actually eat one of these with Sam, but because we have some patients here who are allergic, I'm not going to do so. But I will hand it off to Mom.
All right.
And thank you, sir. Knock yourself out. There you go, my man. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie Ann. Thanks, Sam. We just have a few more slides here, but it's just so nice to hear it that way, right? It's so nice to hear it from a parent, and it's so nice to hear it from that perspective. It's what motivates me, period, every day. We don't talk about our tough cases very much. I almost feel like we should, but it's important that that everyone understands. We take all the complexity, all the complex cases. We hit extremely good rates of remission. I mean, bar none. But we do have the 0.1 percenters who are complex, and I'm the one who deals with them. It gets escalated up to me. And we're in a position now where, that's a low number, but I want you to know that we don't give up on those cases. We work extremely hard. We find a way to get those patients to the finish line. Unfortunately, they don't get I'd say the publicity that I would sometimes like to talk about, but it is a lot of hard work, and again, it goes back to the mission. We are serious about this. We're not going to give up on any case. If you don't give up, we don't give up. We will do it safely, effectively, and get your child to the finish line. So in the last few minutes here, we'll certainly take some questions. In order to do this, as far as expansion is concerned, or get us to where we need to go, we have to improve accessibility. And I've always said from day one, going back many, many years, I really wanted this to be the cost of orthodontics. That's the example I gave people. Orthodontics often costs, it's a couple years of investment, and you get a great smile for the rest of your life. Could we get this down to the price of that so that patients could have safety and remission for the rest of their life? It has been certainly difficult to get to that point, mainly because insurance and insurance coverage and laboratory coverage and such has been a continuous challenge. We made tremendous progress and strides in that in the last few years, but improving accessibility remains our top goal. Maintaining safety. I mean, we maintain a extremely high level of safety. Can we get to 100%? Yeah, that's the goal. That's what we shoot for. We don't accept 99.9 of anything. We will continue to use our data models to get to a maximum level of safety, and we will never move away from that. In the last 2 to 3 years, we have really taken this bull by the horns of insurance. I won't dive into too many details, but I can tell you, dealing with the world of insurance coverage has been absolutely one of the most difficult things we can do, and we've taken on full, meaning software systems built, teams built, strong leadership, contracting and credentialing. As we mentioned in the last few weeks, we are now fully in network with Aetna. That's a great achievement. And we hope by the end of the year, every major payer in the state of California is covered, and that will have a effect, of course, across the nation for all of their patients who are in our program. And if we did this all effectively, in order for us to actually expand, we would have to gain capital. And I mentioned this previously, but this model I've always had from day one is called venture philanthropy. What that basically means is you take a nonprofit, as we have, the TPERC and SoCal Food Allergy, take that nonprofit and spin off something into a for-profit arm, but the nonprofit maintains that ownership. So it has a continuous revenue cycle. It serves the population of patients, but the nonprofit can continue to do its excellent work and only make things better, and of course expand to other disease areas. So this was where we were, on track, moving in this direction until COVID hit. And I will tell you that, in January of 20, I knew we were gonna have a real major issue on our hands. I'm a lung immunologist. I've been around for these things for a while. And I said, there is no way we're gonna stop. We cannot shut down. We cannot close our doors. It is not fair to our patients. And I knew that if we did stop what we were doing, all these patients would lose everything they've gained. So we stayed open. It was huge cost. It was the right thing to do. So we built a testing, tracking, tracing methodology from day one of the pandemic until basically present. And so this allowed our patients to come back. We were able to make adjustments to all treatment plans, send out protein doses to all of our patients across the country and the world for that matter. And this allowed us to not have attrition during this time. What this also did is it was the ultimate stress test for our organization, ultimate stress test for the treatment process. And again, I'm happy to say we passed that test. We did extremely well to make that happen. Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a round of applause for that. That's we had over 200,000 foot traffic in all our facilities during the 2 years of, primary 2 years of the pandemic. We never had a single on-site transmission. We had a lot of positives, don't get me wrong, but we built such a tight system that allowed us to get it done. I'm, again, extremely proud of that. What that allowed us to do is get us to a point where we could actually continue our level of care, continue building our level of care, and get us to the position where we could actually expand and make this model move. So moving forward, this venture philanthropy model is in play, it's in place, where our primary organization, again being TPERC and SoCal Food Allergy, is now in a position where its ownership model is still primary owned nonprofit, but to actually build brick and mortar and expand across the state and eventually across the country, it's going to have a different model as far as it being a food allergy institute. You will see some of these changes move forward. Our website, for example, things of that nature. Core mission's the same, core approach is the same. Our teams are going to be the same highly trained individuals. It's going to continue to only get better. And I'd like to briefly bring up our team, some of our teams. And I want to be just say one word. It used to be that I saw every single patient. It's been many, many years since I've seen any of my patients, and it takes teams of individuals who take this seriously, who understand the mission, who do the training, who make this happen on a day-by-day basis. This is an entirely different specialty of medicine. This is not just immunology. This is not just allergy. This is the tolerance induction program. These are the teams who help us get our patients to the finish line where those children achieve food freedom. They take a lot of, it's not easy, a lot of tests, a lot of training, a lot of day-to-day activity that makes them good at what they do. Certainly the technology is supportive of that, but without a doubt, I wanted to recognize this group who was able to attend today. They are your team to get us to the next stage. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. So if done effectively, we take this model, and this allows us to expand. In March of this year, we opened up a San Diego site, and it's currently up and operating. We have a full-time doctor, we have a full team as well. And why San Diego? Why choose that location? Because again, we have to do this carefully and correctly. So that meant we have to take what we do currently and extend it close enough to us so if we have to make any adjustments, those can be done in a nimble and appropriate fashion. We've done that. It's been frankly, extremely successful. I mean, again, this is what happens when you have really good data science. So if this can be done in one location there, our goal is to expand this, and with the right organizational model, with our right venture model, the incorporation of billing and credentialing and contracting, this gets across the US and it can be done. We have very high aims, and we want to get our patients in a position where they're not having to travel for more than a few hours to get to treatment. It's going to take some time, but I can assure you, I will commit to you that we will get this done. We are now doing some certain site analyses in the Bay Area of Northern California. We believe that we can actually reach our goals and hit our impact. I will be out in the East Coast next month. We're going to start doing some site analysis out there as well. This will get better as we continue to grow. This will get better with as vocal a community as possible. It's just that simple. The more you talk about the program, the more you talk to the individuals who can help raise awareness, the more you can talk to insurance carriers about the need and necessity to get patients to a state of food freedom, that all makes a big difference. We are continuing to gain endorsements. It's really been quite remarkable, but we continue to gain endorsements. We obviously are with the FDA at this stage. All of those things help, but in the end, it is the people who drive the change. And in a world when not much is clear anymore, when I always tell folks, it's about that concept of basic truth. Used to be that was a little more clear, but these days, I don't know what to believe, it seems. But you can't argue data. You can't argue numbers. The math is there. Our models are there. Our output is there. We're under more regulation than a pharmaceutical company at this stage, and have been so. And we're not going to move away from any of those aspects. But in order to get scale, it still takes the community. So I encourage you that if you are so interested, talk to our teams, talk to our nonprofit arm, help support us, get the information out there, but then also get the support out there. It'll move quickly. We were able to establish multiple grants in the last number of years because of the support of our community. For those in our business community, same sort of model exists. We have a tremendous opportunity to produce so many new types of therapeutic options for these patients, whether it's to adults or extremely young children. There's many great opportunities here to impact a very large portion of our population as a whole. So I thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming out on a Sunday. I know we will do many more of these things. We're going to continue to get the word out. I commit to you, as long as I'm, running, where I am at the pace I am, we'll continue to expand this out. And I'm very excited about our future. So with that said, I'm going to hand back off to Shubha, and we'll take a few questions. But once again, thanks.
If you guys can just hang out for a bit, we have a few questions that were submitted by parents, and I get to ask Dr. R a little bit about a lot of the questions that are kind of swimming around in our minds. So if we want to sit down here, I know parents have a lot of questions. I always have a lot of questions for you. So I guess the big overall question, I was speaking to a lot of families out in the lobby about food allergies in general. Why are there so many children now with food allergies in this generation versus past generations?
Yeah, it's probably the number one question I get. And you have to ask yourself, if a condition's about to hit 1 in 10 people, and it's growing at a rate that's faster than a technical generation, if you estimate a generation is about 25 to 30 years, how is it outpacing that? And the short answer is either it's infectious or it's environmental. If it's an infection, as we know with COVID, things can spread. But this doesn't seem to be infection related. There's certainly no data pointing to that overall. My strong belief this is environmental. If you look at the cases that we manage, we are studying the environmental aspects of every case as well. We tie that into food proteins. So plant proteins that are in the air, meaning things like pollen, and plant proteins that you can ingest, such as food proteins, can come together. So it is a combination of young immune systems being in this very unique environment. You can blame climate change, you can blame other things we don't totally understand. But children are growing up in the highest pollen counts, earliest introduction of cross-similar foods with very young immune systems than ever before. So this kind of early approach of exposure stimulates their immune system. Some patients potentially can maybe do better like that, but it seems the bulk of them are not. And that's what's causing this to continue to grow. And to be clear, this is a global problem. We have patients from all over the world. And this tells you that this is something that's bigger than, it's got to be something that's a global impact.
And as a TIP parent and parents out there, I know we were so grateful that the clinic was open during the pandemic. I know my son graduated the program right in 2020 as the pandemic was at its height. How did you guys stay open? What was like the process for staying open for all of us?
Oh yeah, so as a lung immunologist, you have to look at the risk of the disease. That's one thing. But as somebody who spends a lot of time in ICUs and operating rooms and such, you know how to get systems to what's essentially a zero risk state. If you go in an operating room, you can't have any sort of risk of contamination of any kind. So I utilized that knowledge base and said, we got to build similar models in our system. And that's what allowed us to build our IDAP system. To be frank, it really helped having a research lab. It really helped that we could actually order primers for SARS-CoV-2 in the first couple days of the actual pandemic. So we were able to actually run testing and build systems, and we ran environmentals across every one of our buildings and systems. We built tracking methodologies using beacons, and we all tied that into singular technology. So being a technology company helps. Having software ability and being nimble helps. And of course, we never stop doing that. So it's, I think it's just a reflective of our, how flexible we are in different situations.
And here's something that's interesting. I was kind of learning about this myself, is the risk of TIP patients developing EOE or esophageal type diseases.
Yep.
How often does that happen? How do you mitigate it? And what is it exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a good question. I'm glad that it's actually getting more of a spotlight. Think of allergic disease, that term, right? If you can have allergies, you can have eye allergies, you can have lung allergies, that's asthma. You can have sinus allergies, they'll just kind of call that, hay fever, rhinitis. But there's another type of allergy that can actually hit the esophagus, and that is classically termed EOE, or eosinophilic esophagitis. That has been around, first described in the mid-1990s. It's a relatively new diagnosis, number one. Number two, it was almost exclusively diagnosed in adults. They thought at that time it must be related to food because you eat food, it hits your esophagus, it must be linked somehow. By 2005 or so, they realized pretty quickly that most of it's an injury model. So there was some kind of injury going on the esophagus that recruited cells that happened to be allergic, those cells being eosinophils. So they figured out pretty quickly that that was reflux. It was just basically bad heartburn. So indeed, to this day, the vast majority of EOE is actually affiliated with just heartburn. And if you put patients on some heartburn medications, that's fine. So in that sense, the disease is unrelated to food allergy. So now we're starting to understand that EOE is not completely linked to food allergy. In fact, it's a small segment that does so. To answer your question, is there a relationship between food-based immunotherapy and EOE? The answer is yes. Certainly outside of our program, there's a good amount of data that if you blindly expose patients through basics of oral immunotherapy, that a good 25, 35% of them develop EOE-like symptoms. They can actually have some serious outcomes from that. We take those patients and actively treat them using different technology, different approach. So they are a classified group. That's who we actually study. For patients who are not having EOE and they start our program, what is the chance of them developing it in our program? For patients who have been classified at risk at the start of the program, that number remains relatively low. For the patient who has never been classified at risk, we still have less than a dozen cases who've ever developed EOE. And frankly, most of those cases are kind of subclinical. So it certainly has been reported in our database, but it is extremely low given the large number of cases we have. To be frank, if I asked every parent who's going to enroll their kid in the program to go get an endoscopy done and get us that data first, that's a no-go. So we're using a lot of secondary data to try and predict that. But this is another example of very good data science and research. We can start to study that and answer those questions. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, it did. And I'm so excited to see that you guys have a roadmap of some sort to open up more clinics across the country. If you can go into detail a little bit about when things might be opening up, specifically East Coast. Will you have a place on the East Coast for people to go?
Yeah. Again, I had a lot of great forecasting until COVID hit. But we're back in a pretty good position. I'd say our rate limiting factor right now is just insurance billing. If we can get insurance to cover us, I mean, that's key. We want to have the least number of limitations for our patients. We are certainly careful about where we open because we know how many patients already live in that area. We opened up San Diego and hundreds of patients immediately filled that pod. So then we build after that. We look at what we call our heat map, where most of our patients are concentrated. And still right now, about 53, 55% of our patients are California-based. So we do have to pay attention to that. Realistically, we will be in the San Francisco Bay Area. We just came back from there a couple weeks ago and did some outreach and some site analysis. We will likely be there in Q2 of next year, Q1 maybe if we're lucky. But it doesn't mean we're going to not look at the East Coast. So again, I'll be out there next month and we're going to start looking at what that is. At the very least, if we can get the proper licensing and regulatory standards met, we would want to at least take those thousands of patients in the Northeast and have something so it just cuts their distance of travel down significantly. But I would actually like to set it up so we can even see new patients in that type of setting. So I'd say we'll have a little more information in the next few months, but maybe summer of next year, maybe later part of next year, some method should be available to them.
That's a big thing everyone wants to know.
Oh yeah, I know. I often get the question. I have people actually, it's really funny. Because I don't get to see the patients anymore, I have a collection of all of these emblems and such from all states, New York, Tennessee. They're like, open here, and then they'll send me this little thing. So I'm like, I get it, loud and clear. So I'll count the total number of emblems from the most popular place, and that's where we'll go.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Randhawa. This has been such an awesome afternoon. Thank you all again for being here. We know the booths and the exhibitions are going to be open until 3 o'clock, so you still have some time to get out there, and we will see you out there. Thank you.
Thank you.